Hello, this is Dr. Michael Greger, and I'm really excited to be able to bring you this. I used to go around the country and give these talks every year on the latest in clinical nutrition. As you can see, sometimes 40 talks a month. I was basically on the road full-time, but then I was honored to be offered a position here at the Humane Society of the United States, and I've just been so busy that my once monthly nutrition newsletter became bi-monthly, then quarterly, and then gone. Well, I'm proud to announce that it's back, but not online or in print, but on your screen in this new annual DVD series, in which I review each year what's been happening in the field of nutrition over the previous 12 months. Information that won't even make it into dietitian textbooks for another couple years, truly the latest in cutting-edge nutritional science. And as always, all the proceeds I get from the sales of my books, DVDs, speaking engagements, all goes to charity. If you'd like to see the latest annual nutrition review live, in person, I give it every year in a number of cities around the country. If, however, you're unable to make it to a live presentation, please, if any questions arise, don't hesitate to contact me. For this, my 2007 presentation, nearly all the information I'll be sharing was published in the peer-reviewed scientific literature between summer 2006 and summer 2007. Let's start with two Harvard studies rolled into one. After studying more than 100,000 people, they found that bacon and chicken consumption may double our risk of bladder cancer. Same with pancreatic cancer, a horrific disease. Long Island women who ate lots of barbecue have up to 47% greater odds of getting breast cancer. It appeared to be the grilling, the frying, that really seemed to kind of cancer up the meat, but this other study, published a few months earlier, found that for endometrial cancer, at least, it didn't matter how the meat was cooked, and it didn't matter if it was red or white meat. In fact, those eating poultry and fish had the highest risk for cancer. Seems the only healthy fish may be some fanciful creature made out of dark green leafy veggies. Another 35,000 women were studied. They concluded that women both pre- and postmenopausal who ate the most meat had the highest risk of breast cancer. Interestingly, the acknowledgments for the study show that an earlier analysis was funded by the Meat and Livestock Commission. Evidently, when they found out the results, they weren't quite as enthusiastic in their support. The Harvard Nurses Study: eat lots of dairy and double our risk of a heart attack, or feed our kids lots of dairy and triple their risk of colorectal cancer 65 years later. More dairy, more prostate cancer, more testicular cancer, more Parkinson's disease, all again published within just about a 12-month period. And this is no fluke. Every single forward-looking study in history on Parkinson's and dairy found that the more dairy products people consume, the higher their risk of getting Parkinson's. My father has Parkinson's. It's a terrible disease. But why? I mean, why more cancer? Why more disease? What is in animal products that may be so toxic it can cause enough brain damage to trigger Parkinson's? Well, we can start with the industrial carcinogens that tend to build up in animal fat. Just how are dioxin levels affected by a so-called vegetarian regime? Well, vegetarians had significantly lower levels in their blood. In fact, that's how scientists study the dangers of living near something like a trash incinerator. They studied vegetarians because the omnivores buy dioxins at the grocery store. So to know how much toxic waste a community is exposed to, you study the vegetarians who aren't bringing dioxins in from outside and swallowing them at home. What about PCBs? Scientists look at the diets and feces of vegans versus omnivores, and not surprisingly, meat eaters were found to flush much more of this serious carcinogen through their systems. Every year, hundreds of the top cancer scientists from countries around the world converge to discuss the latest on diet and cancer. I'd like to share what I found to be the most interesting highlight from this year's conference. First, some background. 1 cancer cell never hurt anyone. 2 cancer cells never hurt anyone. But 1 billion cancer cells, that's when we start getting into trouble. So we have to slow and reverse the division and growth of cancer cells. We all have cells that could grow into tumors, but if we slow them down, our immune systems may be able to clean them up before they spell trouble. Take breast cancer, for example, the most common cancer among American women. Like all cancers, it starts with 1 cell. This is a photograph taken under a microscope of an actual breast cancer cell, which then divides and becomes 2 cells, and then 4, 8, and so on. Every time the cells divide, the tiny tumor doubles in size, and the tumor only need double about 30 times, and we're up to 1 billion cancer cells, which is a tumor just large enough to be picked up by mammography. Even though it only has to double 30 times, it takes between 25 and 1,000 days for cancer cells to double just once. So that means from the time that first cell gets mutated, it takes between 2 and 100 years before it actually shows up as a little tumor we can see. The shortest known interval between exposure to a carcinogen and cancer is about 18 months, which is when the first leukemia cases started appearing after Hiroshima. Cancers need time to grow, and for most solid tumors, meaning non-blood tumors like breast cancer, cancer can take decades to develop. Many breast cancers may start in the teen years. Some think we actually may start developing breast cancers in the womb before we're even born, and that depends in part on what our mom ate. This is what's called the promotion stage of cancer. 20 years ago, I ate meat, a lot of meat. I very well may have mutated one of the cells in my prostate, or liver, or colon, but I don't mind if I get cancer in 100 years. I don't expect to be around to worry about it. The cancer may have been initiated by a DNA mutation, but if we don't promote it, if we keep it dormant, if we slow it down, we may even be able to reverse its growth. According to autopsy studies in Japan, they've got just as much prostate cancer as we do, but the rate of Japanese men dying from prostate cancer is 1/10 that of American men's, until they start eating like us. Japan has the #1 longest life expectancy of any nation. The U.S. falls around 19th. When Japanese men finally do die, though, many have tiny prostate tumors, but they die with their cancer instead of from their cancer. By age 80, the majority of men have tiny cancerous prostate tumors, and by age 40, 1/3 of women have microscopic cancerous breast tumors. It's like atherosclerosis. About half of young Americans in their 20s already have atherosclerotic plaques hardening their arteries. Many of us right now have tumors growing inside of us. So we can't wait until later to start eating healthier. We have to start now. How can we slow down and reverse cancer while it's still microscopic? Well, for prostate and breast cancers, these tissues tend to be sensitive to growth-promoting steroid hormones like estrogen. So one way to decrease our levels of these steroid hormones may be to stop eating and drinking them by avoiding eggs, meat, and dairy. OK, let's get to the new research. UCLA scientists placed women on a plant-based diet with exercise, and the levels of all measured growth hormones in their blood dropped dramatically. That's not new news. It's what they did next that made this one of the most exciting papers to come from that conference. Before and after the dietary change was initiated, researchers drew blood from the women and dripped it on live human breast cancer cells growing in a petri dish. After just 2 weeks, the blood of women on the plant-based diet reduced the cancer growth rate by 20%. This is before, right? Just packed with cancer. This is after. Just 2 weeks on a plant-based diet, and the blood circulating throughout their entire bodies was that inhospitable to cancer. Again, many of us right now have tumors growing inside of us, so we can't wait until we're older to start eating healthier. We have to start now, tonight. The skin cancer we die of at 50 may have been because of a teenage sunburn, and those who eat dairy, milk, cheese, or yogurt may have 2.5 times the risk of certain bad skin cancers. These researchers did, however, find something so incredibly powerful that it cuts skin cancer risk by about 50%. Greens. Eating dark green leafy vegetables cuts our risk in half. Yes, but how many greens do these people have to eat? Well, here's the data. These are the people who ate the most greens and had half the cancer risk, compared to these who ate the least, averaging only 6 grams of greens a day. That's the weight of six paper clips. They must have, accidentally ate the garnish or something, some sprig of parsley next to their steak. What about the highest tier of greens intake? Cutting their squamous cell skin cancer risk in half. Just 31 grams of greens a day, 31 paper clips. That's the equivalent of just 3 leaves of spinach. 1, 2, 3 leaves a day. Half the risk of this cancer. That's how powerful greens are. My motto is, eat your greens every day of your life until you die. Last year, there was even a greens review in American history. General George Washington, 1777, gave the general order for American troops to go out and pick the wild greens growing around their camps to protect them from all putrid disorders. Smart man. Just as eating meat increases our risk of cancer, eating plants decreases that risk. This study found that eating a lot of plant foods could cut our risk of getting breast cancer in half, thanks to dietary fiber. Remember, fiber is only found in plant foods. Animals have bones to hold them up. Plants have fiber to hold them up. But only whole plant foods are good sources of fiber. Refined foods like white flour, white bread, white rice, white pasta have much of the fiber and other nutrients stripped from them. Same with endometrial cancer. Lots of animal protein, animal fat, we get nearly twice the risk. Lots of plant protein, plant fat, nearly half the risk. 97,000 women studied ovarian cancer, another really horrific cancer. Lots of isoflavones cut our risk in half. What's the top source of isoflavones? Soy foods. Though soy-based meat alternatives often lack the fiber of whole plant foods, compare plant to animal bacon. Same serving size, but Babe over here has 4 times the calories, 50 times the fat, 40 times the saturated fat, infinitely more cholesterol, and only 1/4 of the protein, and increases our cancer risk, while the soy-based bacon may decrease that risk. It's simple, right? High fruit, low meat, less tumors. I'm not just being selective with these studies. I have for years challenged anyone to produce a single study showing more cancer on a plant-based diet. Frankly, no such study exists. Another huge study, Journal of the National Cancer Institute, more plants, less cancer. Why? Dietary lignin intake. Lignins are one class of thousands of compounds called phytonutrients. Phyto means plant. These are special plant nutrients. The best source of lignins on the planet? Flax seeds. Flaxseed is one of the original health foods, treasured for its healing properties throughout the Roman Empire, and one of the original medicines used by Hippocrates. Mahatma Gandhi himself was right when he said, quote, "Wherever flax seeds become a regular food item among the people, there will be better health," unquote. Dr. Andrew Weil, one of the more reputable alternative medicine physicians, says that if we could only make a single dietary change, it should be to add flax seeds to our diet. OK, but where do we find them, and how should we eat them? Flax seeds are almost always in the bulk section of any natural food store, and for about $1 a pound, you've got like a 2-month supply. There are brown ones and golden ones. They're the same nutritionally, so pick your favorite color, I guess. They come with nature's own finest packaging, a hard natural hull that keeps them fresh for up to a year in an airtight container. Unfortunately, nature's packaging is actually a little too good. If we eat flax seeds whole, they're likely to pass right through us, come out the other end, and not do us much good. So chew them really well, or grind them up in a coffee or spice grinder, a mini food processor, or a good blender. After they're ground, store them in the refrigerator, and they'll last a few months. An easy way to get our daily intake is with a morning smoothie. Just put 2 tablespoons of flax seeds in a blender, grind them to powder, throw in some frozen berries, maybe half a frozen banana, some soy milk or almond milk, any of the so-called motherless milks. Flax seeds have this binding quality that makes for these thick, rich, kind of milkshakey type smoothies. In fact, you can use ground flaxseed to replace eggs in baking. Just blend 1 tablespoon of ground flax with 3 tablespoons of water until it gets all kind of gooey for each egg in the recipe. And ground flax is better than the flaxseed oil. The seeds are little nutrition powerhouses, and we lose much of the nutrition when we just press out the oil. Not only are flax seeds the richest source of lignins, but they're a great source of iron, zinc, copper, calcium, protein, potassium, magnesium, folate, soluble fiber, which can lower our cholesterol and triglycerides, and even boron, a trace mineral important for optimum bone health. We don't get any of those, though, with just the flaxseed oil. Another example of the importance of eating whole plant foods. Flax seeds are incredibly powerful at dampening the effects of estrogen. Eating just a single tablespoon of ground flaxseed a day extends the length of a woman's menstrual cycle, not the menses itself, but the whole month-long cycle, by an average of about 1 day. So you have fewer periods throughout your life, which means less estrogen exposure and lower breast cancer risk. There's an interesting story behind this. We've known for a long time that young women who have frequent bladder infections were at an increased risk for breast cancer. Frequent bladder infections tied to breast cancer? It seems strange. It used to be a big mystery, but now we think that repeated antibiotic treatments for the bladder infections were probably wiping out all the good bacteria from the colon that take the lignins in our diet and turn them into these powerful anti-cancer compounds. So eating flax, the world's best source of lignins, may indeed help prevent breast cancer. It's good for men, too. Flax seeds were recently compared to a leading pharmacological treatment for enlarged prostates. The standard drug costs about $300 a year, versus only about $10 perhaps for daily flax. This new study found that they both work just as well as each other, but what about the side effects? Well, the drug can cause headaches, dizziness, diarrhea, and all sorts of abnormalities. Flax has some side effects too, though. It improves our cholesterol and blood sugar, controls our blood pressure, and helps control hot flashes, though that's not usually a big problem in sufferers of enlarged prostates. The fiber in flax seeds and other whole plant foods is more than just about reducing our risk for the number 1 and 2 killers of Americans, heart disease and cancer. Constipation is the most common gastrointestinal complaint in the United States, leading to millions of doctor visits every year. More than just the discomfort, constipation can increase risk for hiatal hernia, varicose veins, hemorrhoids, and painful conditions with names like anal fissure. The biggest study on bowel movement frequency in history was recently published, comparing the bowel habits of 15,000 meat-eaters to 5,000 vegetarians and 1,000 vegans. The researchers conclude that being vegetarian, especially vegan, is strongly associated with a higher frequency of bowel movements. Vegans, for example, were about 3 times more likely to have daily BMs. It's like I always said, vegans are just regular people. What else is in plant foods that's good for us, besides the fiber, lignans, and isoflavones? Well, there's a wonderful phytonutrient in broccoli that we think accounts for much of its cancer-fighting effects. This was done in a petri dish this year. Cells exposed to carcinogens essentially just had broccoli dripped on them, and that alone protected their DNA from being mutated. Some new wonder drug? No, broccoli. There's another phytonutrient in broccoli that may reduce our fatal heart attack risk by 1/3. Once again, a reminder to eat our greens. Our hamster, Golda, was a great greens-eating role model for the whole family. But greens are more than just broccoli or those 3 spinach leaves. All greens have wonderful effects on us. Just to emphasize the point, the antioxidant, anti-mutagenic, anti-tumor effects of pine needles. Greens are greens, even when they're long and skinny. As General Washington ordered, even wild greens. But you have to know what you're eating. Once upon a time, a young vegan was looking for this plant, but instead picked this plant. So instead of having a nice cup of tea, he had a nice cup of poisonous foxglove, hence the article this year in the International Journal of Cardiology, an unusual case of atrioventricular heart block in a young vegan. They conclude in the article that should a vegan present in the emergency room with heart block, ask them what weeds they've been eating. So, okay, not all green leafies are good for us, but as long as we stay away from foxglove, hemlock, the tobacco leaf, and a few other leaves I could mention. The next villain on the lung cancer battlefield? Yes, from a cancer perspective, smoking a single marijuana joint is equivalent to smoking an entire pack of cigarettes. I'd also recommend staying away from the tiny dark green leafies, blue-green algae, and spirulina. This story starts in Guam, where the Chamorro people were eating perhaps the world's cutest bat, the flying fox. That was a mistake, since it turns out the flying fox's favorite fruit is from this funky-looking tree, whose watery roots concentrate a toxin produced by some rare algae. The result was that the Chamorro started dying of something called amyotrophic lateral sclerosis Parkinsonism dementia, basically a combination of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and Lou Gehrig's disease. Now, we used to think neurotoxins were limited to rare exotic algae, but now we know otherwise. We now know that almost all blue-green algae can produce neurotoxins, like BMAA. Turns out the only two places one may be likely to find BMAA is in the brains of Alzheimer's patients and at the local natural food store in the form of blue-green algae. So, until we know more, I recommend leaving that particular product out of your cart. And this, spirulina, the other pond scum, well, it's good for our blood pressure and our cholesterol, and seems to work wonders against seasonal allergies, but spirulina may dissolve our muscles from the inside out. It's always better when our food doesn't kill us. What about the quintessential health food, alfalfa sprouts? According to the American Dietetic Association, Food and Drug Administration, and Centers for Disease Control, no sprouts. There have been a number of serious outbreaks of food poisoning tied to sprouts. Take Salmonella, for example. Last year, linked to sprouts, there were not one, not two, but about 100 cases of Salmonella food poisoning, which is a gift that can keep on giving. You get Salmonella once, and you may suffer from chronic arthritis for the rest of your life, and so the CDC has decreed no sprouts. We should put this in context, though. Last year, sprout consumption led to 100 cases of Salmonella poisoning. Compare that to eggs, though, which caused 118,000 cases of Salmonella poisoning last year. Do we hear the CDC saying, don't eat eggs? No, but they do say not to eat raw or runny eggs. Even sunny side up or scrambled does not eliminate the Salmonella threat. Eggs have to be cooked hard to kill off the bacteria. Similarly, if we boiled our sprouts, they'd be safe too, but I don't know how appetizing that would be. Disturbing data keeps coming in. How much of the potentially deadly Jack-in-the-Box E. coli 0157 is found in retail beef, sprouts, and mushrooms? Well, none were found in any mushrooms, but 1 out of every 91 burgers is contaminated, and 1 out of just 67 alfalfa sprout containers. So no burgers, no alfalfa sprouts, even homegrown. The bacteria can get into the nooks and crannies of the alfalfa seed itself that you may buy at the store. Remember that 24-hour flu you had last year? Well, there's no such thing as a 24 or 48-hour flu. There's no such thing as stomach flu. What you had was likely food poisoning. When someone gets hepatitis from eating a strawberry, the hepatitis didn't come from the strawberry. They don't even have little livers. As Dr. McDougall likes to point out, when's the last time we heard of someone getting Dutch elm disease or a bad case of aphids? Food poisoning comes from animals, specifically animal feces, and that manure runoff can contaminate sprout seeds, spinach, and other healthy plant foods. Still, that's better than eating the manure directly. Animal products, particularly fish and poultry, can be covered in fecal bacteria. It's so bad that while the federal government recommends we wash our fruits and veggies, we're not even supposed to rinse meat and poultry for fear of the viral and bacterial splatter. Chicken carcasses so covered in fecal matter that researchers at the University of Arizona found more fecal bacteria in the kitchen, on sponges, dish towels, and the sink drain, than they found swabbing the toilet. Even after bleaching everything twice, in a meat-eater's house, it is safer to lick the rim of the toilet seat than the kitchen countertop, because people aren't preparing chickens in their toilets. Frankly, you know that chicken juice isn't juice. It's essentially raw fecal soup. And in terms of fish hygiene, researchers swabbed sushi for fecal bacteria. The National Food Standards Guidelines for maximum fecal bacteria on ready-to-eat food items is 30,000. OK, well, this is what they found. They also swabbed vegetarian sushi, avocado, and cucumber rolls, and found zero contamination, zero fecal bacteria. Unlike salmon and tuna, avocados and cucumbers don't have rectums. Produce can be contaminated by manure runoff, and conventional produce may be contaminated with pesticides. We've known for years that the 800 million pounds of pesticides used annually in the United States, the herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, have clear-cut detrimental effects on farm workers and their families. That's uncontroversial. You can even do what are called hand wipe studies to actually measure the pesticides in the hands of kids in California's Central Valley, where the planes come down and spray this fog. How much exposure urban and suburban children are getting from food, however, has been unclear until now. Twice-daily urine samples were taken from 3 to 11-year-olds for more than a year to see how much pesticide is flowing through our kids. These children were nowhere near farms or fog-spraying planes, and to single out pesticides that were coming from the diet, as opposed to like a lawn treatment or something, for 2 weeks of the year, the kids were put on an organic diet. Guess which 2 weeks those were. So the 2 times during the year when they ate organic foods, there were undetectable or nearly undetectable pesticide residues in their urine, while their little bodies were basically swimming in it the rest of the year. In my 2000 update, I told everyone about this disturbing study: vegetarianism during pregnancy associated with having sons with a specific birth defect of the penis called hypospadias. They thought it might have something to do with the phytoestrogens in soy, but that didn't make any sense, since Japan, with the highest per capita soy consumption in the world, did not have high rates of the defect. I guessed that it might be low vitamin B12 levels, leading to high homocysteine, which has been related to other birth defects, but we were all wrong. Finally, though, the mystery seems to have been solved. The researchers reanalyzed the data for clues as to what could be found in the diets of vegetarians compared to meat-eaters, other than more good things, like more fruits and vegetables, unless there's an endocrine-disrupting fungicide called vinclozolin that's sprayed on most of our conventional crops that we now know causes hypospadias. So researchers went back and split up the vegetarian moms into 2 groups, those eating organic produce and those eating conventional produce. And while the vegetarian women eating conventional produce during pregnancy had indeed higher birth defects rates, there was not a single case in the organic group. So it seems the hypospadias wasn't due to vegetarian diets, it was that they were exposing their fetus to more pesticides. Can't we just rinse our produce off? Well, it's better than nothing, but this new study looked at 3 pesticides on apples. Levels start out at 100%. Now, rinsing only seems to take off about 15% of the pesticides. The only way to really cut down our dose is to peel the apple, eliminating about 85% of the pesticides, but also eliminating much of the nutrition. So eat organic foods whenever possible. Organic produce has more vitamins, more minerals, tastes better, stores better, and you get to not be complicit in the poisoning of farm workers and their families. Let me make one thing clear, though. Even if all you have to eat are the single most pesticide-contaminated plant foods, the peaches, the apples, peppers, the benefits of these fruits and vegetables outweigh the risk, even if you can't find organic options. So while organic is absolutely better, we should never avoid buying fruits and vegetables out of fears of pesticide exposure. Remember the green study? 3 leaves of spinach. The benefits of even pesticide-laden conventional produce blow away the risks, but if you have a choice and the means, certainly buy organic. Plants are storehouses of thousands of special phytonutrients. What is in plant foods that's so good for us? Is it the vitamin C, the vitamin E, the fiber, the folate, flavonoids, phytoestrogens, the antioxidants, the beta-carotene, the potassium, lycopene, lutein? Does it really matter? Well, it matters to the drug manufacturers, right? They can't patent a carrot and make $1 million off it, although I'm sure they're trying. Drug companies have done all these studies where they said, look, we know fruits and vegetables prevent cancer. I bet it's that beta-carotene stuff. So they gave people beta-carotene supplements to see if that prevented cancer. Didn't work. There are more than 500 different carotenoids, more than 500 carotenes, from alpha-carotene through zeta-carotene and beyond, and they just gave people beta and expected it to work? So they tried vitamin E supplements. Didn't work. Vitamin C supplements. Didn't work. It's just you can't find the right mixture. Lutein, this great antioxidant in leafy greens, has recently been added to Centrum's one-a-day multivitamin. If you look on the back here, it says each pill has 250 micrograms of lutein. Well, this single leaf of collard greens has more than 10,000. Popeye was right. Eat your greens. So instead of trying to synthesize a pill to prevent cancer, we've known all along that whole fruits and veggies prevent cancer naturally. So why don't doctors prescribe them? They're cheap. Doctors should be whipping out their prescription pads and writing prescriptions for broccoli, 1 cup a day, unlimited refills. Side effects include a lower risk of mouth cancer, throat cancer, esophageal cancer, lung, breast, stomach, colon, kidney, bladder, prostate, ovarian, endometrial, and cervical cancer as well. Oh, and you might get a little piece of green stuck in your teeth, all embarrassing. The same diet that prevents stroke and cancer also prevents heart disease and diverticulosis, and protects against emphysema, dementia, cataracts, and macular degeneration. Imagine if the kale lobby had McDonald's $100 million advertising budget. So try to put veggies on everything. The more the better. Right? No longer should we ever have spaghetti with marinara sauce. We should have spaghetti with marinara sauce with lots of veggies on top. Right? No longer just a bean burrito, but a bean burrito with lots of veggies stuffed in it. And vegetables should ideally be the centerpiece of our meals. The official federal recommendation for the minimum number of servings of fruits and veggies is now up to 9 a day minimum, and iceberg lettuce doesn't count towards that total, and neither does fruit juice, Fruit Loops, ketchup, or white potatoes. The World Health Organization blames literally millions of deaths every year on inadequate fruit and vegetable intake, almost as deadly as smoking. Right, so if we care enough about ourselves and our families to not want to die a horrific death from smoking, we should put the same effort into eating more fruits and vegetables. We should eat fruits and vegetables as if our lives depended on it, because in a way, they do. Why haven't many of us heard of this change from 5 a day to 9 a day? Well, the federal government spends about $10 million a year to educate people about healthy eating. Candy corporations spend about twice that amount just launching a new candy bar. Okay, but why don't most doctors pass this information along? Because odds are your doctor never learned any of this. Less than a quarter of medical schools have even a single dedicated course on nutrition, and less than 6% of graduating physicians may have received any formal nutrition training. Out of thousands of hours of preclinical instruction, your doctor may have gotten an average of 3 hours of nutrition training. There was even a study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that pitted doctors versus patients in a head-to-head test of basic nutrition knowledge, simple true or false questions. Guess who won? The patients. People off the street knew more about nutrition than their doctors. Yet people still ask their doctors for nutrition advice, and what doctors may be telling their patients to eat may be killing them. It wasn't too long ago that doctors were advising pregnant women to smoke cigarettes to help with morning sickness. Until doctors are taught more about nutrition, they're advising us about diet may be physician-assisted suicide. There is one doctor, though, everyone trusts, perhaps the most famous physician of all time, Dr. Benjamin Spock. Always on the forefront of important social issues, in the final edition of his book, the best-selling book in American history, second only to the Bible, he recommended that all children be raised on meat and dairy-free diets to prevent diseases like cancer. Is it better to eat our vegetables raw or cooked? If you're thinking raw, you're right. But if you guessed cooked, you're also right. A number of nutrients, like vitamin C, are partially destroyed by cooking. On the other hand, some nutrients become more absorbable upon cooking. For example, we get 3 times more antioxidants in cooked carrots than raw, more cancer-fighting indoles in cooked broccoli, and more lycopene in cooked tomatoes. Leavening increases the mineral absorption in grain products, and dry roasting can increase the mineral absorption from nuts. There's no good evidence that raw diets are superior to other whole foods, plant-based diets. In fact, the published evidence that does exist is fairly disappointing. The only dietary survey I'm aware of found raw food diets deficient in energy, protein, vitamins B12 and D, calcium, selenium, and zinc. There are a number of seriously flawed myths that circulate within the raw foods community, like the belief that we only have a limited amount of enzymes in our body that somehow get used up, and so we need to consume live plant enzymes, which are deactivated by cooking. Well, they're deactivated by our stomach acid too, but even if they weren't, specific enzymes catalyze specific reactions within our body, and since we're not plants, we have no need for plant enzymes. Our body makes all the enzymes we need to function from the protein we eat, and cooking actually renders proteins more digestible. So I advocate eating a combination of cooked and raw foods. Having said that, we should all be eating down to huge salads every day, and we could easily polish off 5 cups of spinach in one sitting. That's how we have to think of greens, not as some little overcooked side servings. If, for whatever reason, you want to eat 100% raw, first, of course, you have to take a B12 supplement. Second, a diet based on modern cultivated fruits is not nutritionally adequate. They're a pale shadow of the wild fruits eaten by our ape ancestors. To improve the nutritional content, one would have to add at least a ½ kilo a day of dark green leafies, about 5 to 10 cups, and at least 50 grams a day of nuts and seeds, about ½ a cup. And third, I explicitly recommend against raw food diets for young children, as they just don't have the stomach capacity. Although an all-raw food diet can be healthy, there is no reliable evidence to suggest that it's more healthy than a diet of whole plant foods, cooked or not. As important it is for us to eat our greens, we should also eat our beans. We've all heard about how good soybeans are for us, but what about the less exotic pinto bean? ½ a cup of cooked pinto beans a day for 2 months means a 20-point drop in our cholesterol. New wonder drug? No, just pinto beans. Same with baked beans. ½ a cup of canned vegetarian baked beans a day for 2 months, navy beans this time, and the same amazing effect. It was a randomized crossover clinical study with a control group and the vegetarian baked bean treatment group. Of all the treatments we have in allopathic medicine, radiation treatments, chemotherapy, a vegetarian baked bean treatment sounds pretty benign. Right? Imagine if there were a pill that could do that and go good with toast. They'd be making a fortune. Beans are, after all, one of nature's most perfect foods, the whole plant in just one little package, right? Low in fat, and no cholesterol, and high in fiber and protein. So just like we can improve the nutrition of any dish by adding greens and other veggies, we can do the same by adding beans. Another study this year showed some remarkable qualities about watermelon, a fruit once dismissed as being basically, well, water. Now we realize it's a rich source of citrulline, which I talked about in a previous year's review. So yes, watermelon is a healthy fruit, healthier than we used to think, but there's healthier still. Greens are the healthiest vegetable, but what are the healthiest fruits? A few years ago, I talked about the study suggesting that eating a single serving of berries every day could add an extra year to our lifespan. Wait a second, tastes great and we get to live longer? That's really what plant-based eating is all about. More good news this year on cranberries and blueberries. In general, berries are packed with wonderful phytonutrients with nice names like petuniadin. That's another difference between plant and animal-based foods. In plant foods, there's like theanins in tea, and gingerols, rosmarinic acid, lemonoids like lemonin and tangerine, whereas in animal-based foods there are substances with names like putrescine in turkey muscle. This is from the Journal of Nutrition. Dietary putrescine doesn't really roll off the tongue, nor would I want it to, frankly, touch my tongue at all. Okay, berries are great, but what about more exotic fruits like noni? May not be the prettiest fruit, but for $40 a bottle, it better be good for us, right? Well, it is a fruit, so it's got some antioxidants, but no more than apples or oranges or even bananas. What's more important, though, is that it may kill us. Noni juice seems to shut down this poor 24-year-old woman's liver. What else appears natural but may wreak havoc? Herbalife likes to show us before and after pictures like this. But this is the kind of after picture they don't want us to see. Case reports are pouring in. Herbalife-induced liver injury, acute hepatotoxicity, severe hepatotoxicity. So no Herbalife, no noni juice. There is a beverage other than water I do encourage everyone to drink every day, though, and that is tea. This year, a review was published on the antibacterial, antitoxin, antiviral, and antifungal activities of tea. What more could we want? Anti-cancer? Done. We conclude that the regular consumption of green tea can protect against cancer. What else could we ask for? How about anti-death? Tea's got that too. Reduced all-cause mortality. Drink green tea every day and live, on average, a longer life. This shouldn't really come as a surprise, since, after all, it's just dark green leafies in water. I know what some people may be thinking, though. Rather than drink the 5 cups a day it may take to extend one's life, if it's so good for you, I'll just take some green tea extract pills. Certainly lots to choose from. Not a good idea. Why was there a study about green tea extract pills in the Journal of Liver Transplantation? Because of the acute liver failure induced by green tea extract. 5 cups of tea isn't that much. That's really just 1 pot of tea. 40 ounces is the size of a typical drinking bottle, less than a super big gulp. 40 ounces is, frankly, 40 ounces. And no, I'm not saying you should drink a 40 every day. There are now dozens of flavored green teas on the market now. If you kind of don't like the taste of it straight, just don't put cow's milk in it. This year, from the British Nutrition Foundation, does adding milk remove the benefits of your daily cup of tea? The answer is yes. It seems that cow proteins bind up all the good phytonutrients. None of the soy, rice, or nut proteins in plant-based milks have that same nutrition-canceling effect. What about nuts? A whole handful every day. Harmful, harmless, or helpful? Not only helpful, a single handful of nuts a day may cut our risk of having a heart attack in half, and may cut our risk of dying from heart disease in half as well. People who smoke double their risk of dying from heart disease, so don't ever smoke. People who don't eat nuts every day double their risk of dying from heart disease, so don't ever not eat nuts, unless, of course, you're allergic. The available evidence suggests that eating nuts may extend our life by literally years. Any kind of nuts? Basically all nuts except chestnuts and coconuts. Even peanuts should be considered nuts because of their nutritional profile, even though they're technically not. So am I saying peanut butter will likely help us live longer? Yes. Is there anything else besides nuts and not smoking that can just down and dirty cut our risk in half of dying from heart disease, the #1 killer of both American men and women every single year since 1918? Yes, vitamin X, also known by its full name, exercise. Briskly walking just a few miles a day, according to the Honolulu Heart Study, cuts our cardiac risk in half. Exercise is like choosing a healthy diet. Diets only work if we stick with them our whole life. Same with exercise, so we should pick something we enjoy and not be afraid to try something new. Water aerobics classes at community health centers, or yoga, bike a scenic path, walk the dog, join a team. Use it as a stress reduction time. If you're more of an indoor person, watch TV or a movie while jogging on a treadmill or pedaling on an exercise bike. Now, how much exercise do we need to do? Well, just like the change from 5 a day to 9 a day, the exercise recommendations have changed as well. In 1996, the Surgeon General called for 30 minutes a day. That's not what the science showed, but he didn't want to scare people off, didn't want to make it sound too extreme, didn't think we could handle the truth. The same patronizing reason. The target cholesterol is 200, not 150, which science clearly shows it to be. Authorities want to make things sound achievable. Well, tell that to all the families left behind. Anyway, the Surgeon General's half-hour-a-day recommendation that was 10 years ago. Finally, the Institute of Medicine believed we could handle the truth, and after looking at the data, recommended 60 minutes a day, every day, of what they call moderately intense physical activity, like brisk walking. An hour a day may sound like a lot, but when our bodies were evolving over millions of years, all we did was basically exercise all day. Right? Our bodies were built to move at a minimum of an hour a day. I think this cartoon says it best. What fits your busy schedule better, exercising for an hour a day, or being dead 24 hours a day? Exercising regularly isn't just about living longer. It decreases our risk of developing dementia. You'll not only be healthier, you'll feel healthier. Your immune system will be stronger, you'll sleep better, you'll have more energy, you'll speed up your metabolism, you'll work off the stress in your life, and you'll improve your mood just by moving our bodies. So ideally, every day, greens, beans, berries, tea, and nuts. Don't nuts make you fat, though? No. Here's the latest study: 2 handfuls of nuts added to their daily diet, and no weight gain. Every single one of the 20 studies on nuts and weight gain, 20 out of 20, say the same thing: no weight gain. We're not sure if they boost our metabolism or, heck, violate the second law of thermodynamics. Regardless, nuts will not make us fat. That's what the science shows, though meat, eggs, and dairy might. The biggest study on vegans in human history found that not only are vegans leaner than everyone else, leaner than vegetarians who are leaner than omnivores, but vegans get less of that age-related weight gain. We don't know exactly why, but it may partly be due to the soy. Compared to milk protein, the protein in soy prevents the increase in abdominal fat observed with the milk protein casein. Feed people dairy protein, and you can see their tummy fat increases 20 to 40 square centimeters, whereas the same diet, the exact same diet, same calories, same everything, except soy protein instead of milk protein, and abdominal fat shrinks 10 to 15. There's lots of buzz about the new over-the-counter fat-blocking diet drug Ally. It has some side effects, of course, side effects with names like anal leakage. This is the drug company's own website promoting the drug, and they're so concerned about the resulting uncontrollable diarrhea that they advise it's probably a smart idea to wear dark pants and to bring a change of clothes with you to work. They are forced to advertise the fact that their drug may cause you to crap your pants at work. So I guess you can choose a good diet or a good diaper. In 2007, whole grains were linked to a healthier body weight in people both young and old. Whole grains are the very staples of human civilization. The Aztec Empire had amaranth, the Incas had quinoa, Asian empires were built on rice and buckwheat, African empires had millet and teff, and wheat, oats, rye, and barley kept Europe going. You should be able to find any of these whole grains in bulk at your local natural food store. When whole wheat flour is milled into white flour, at least 25 nutrients are removed, and 5 are chemically replaced to enrich it. It is the great grain robbery. And that's just the vitamins and minerals. There's also a 200 to 300-fold loss in phytonutrient content. So if we have a choice, never again white bread, white pasta, or white rice. Instead, eat the grain, the whole grain, and nothing but. A healthy body weight is important, but more important than the circumference of our waist is the circumference of our carotid arteries that supply the blood to our brain. Researchers at Wake Forest University followed 1,000 people for 5 years and measured the amount of plaque in their carotid arteries. This is what our blood flow should look like. This is what our blood flow should not look like. Those eating whole grains had a slower progression of their atherosclerotic disease. Now, these were all omnivores who ate meat, so the plaque in their arteries continued to grow, but those eating whole grains had slower growth, slower closing off of their arteries than those just eating refined grains. Now, to use diet to actually stop the plaque from growing, to reverse the disease and actually start opening up our arteries, they'd have to have gone on a nearly completely plant-based diet and eliminate cholesterol and saturated animal fat. Not all fats are bad, though. There are good fats, the monounsaturated fats in nuts and avocados. There are great fats, the omega-3 fats in flax seeds, and then there are the bad fats, the saturated fats found primarily in meat and dairy, and finally, the killer fats, trans fats, which are found only 2 places, hydrogenated oils and meat and dairy. Trans fats are basically only found 1 place in nature, in animal fats. Now, thanks to better living through chemistry, though, the food industry found a way to create these toxic fats synthetically by hardening vegetable oil in a process called hydrogenation, which rearranges their atoms to make them behave more like animal fats. This may be good for shelf life, but not good for human life. The most prestigious scientific body in the United States, the National Academy of Sciences, released a damning report on trans fats and concluded that the only safe intake of trans fats was 0. The Academy said that the tolerable upper daily limit of intake was 0. If the National Academy of Sciences is saying the only safe intake of trans fats is 0, and about 1/5 of American trans fat intake is coming from animal products, did they recommend that everyone should only eat vegan? No, they didn't, but why not? They were challenged on it, and one of the authors of the report, a nutritional epidemiologist at the Harvard School of Public Health, responded, "We can't tell people to stop eating all meat and all dairy products," he said. "Well, we could tell people to become vegetarians," he added. "If we were truly basing this on science, we would, but it is a bit extreme." Amazing. Wouldn't want scientists to base anything on science, would we? Now, what about those who say there's no such thing as good fat, advising people to cut back on foods like nuts and avocados, even though they are whole plant foods? I do not believe this is supported by the balance of evidence. When in good faith I've challenged these folks to provide me with scientific studies supporting that position, they show me studies done on African green monkeys. I'm a physician, not a veterinarian. Rather than finding out what happens when you feed monkeys guacamole, I'm interested in human studies, and human studies show that eating a handful of nuts a day may cut our risk of fatal heart attack in half. Now, there are human studies, like this new one, that show that even a single high-fat meal can immediately adversely affect our arteries. What exactly were they eating, though? The high-fat meal consisted of McDonald's sausage and egg McMuffins, 42 grams of fat. What would happen if you did the same study and even doubled the amount of fat to 80 grams, but from olive oil or walnuts, plant sources. You don't get the negative reaction you do from animal fat, and with walnuts, you get a beneficial effect, an immediate positive effect on our arteries eating handfuls of walnuts. So, high-fat animal foods, bad reaction. Higher fat olive oil, no reaction. And walnuts, good reaction. Despite what some may have us believe, avocados and nuts are health-promoting foods, at least in human beings. In fact, the positive health effects of nuts are so powerful, they are trying to add walnuts to meat. Walnut-enriched restructured meat, essentially injecting walnut paste into steaks to improve people's nutrition. Like, why not just eat the walnuts? The food industry, definitely creative. Check out this new study published in the Journal of Nutrition, a NutriBusiness strategy for processing and marketing animal-source foods to children. The meat laboratory at Penn State University trying to come up with a novel animal product called the Chipperoo, designed especially for children. It's meant to be a cross somewhere between beef jerky and a potato chip, made out of chickens or rabbits. Here's actual footage of a guy making it. Strips of raw bunny batter to sell to kids. I couldn't make up stuff like this. I mean, walnut-enriched restructured meat? If you really want to combine nuts with something rather than meat, how about chocolate? The emerging role of cocoa in the prevention of disease. When I first saw this, I was sure it said habitual cocaine intake, but no, habitual cocoa intake. Eat cocoa and lower your blood pressure. Cocoa comes from the cacao bean, and like other beans, has wonderful health-promoting flavanol phytonutrients, like in green tea. Eat cocoa. Notice I didn't say eat chocolate. I said eat cocoa. Now, of course, milk chocolate is completely out of the question, because the milk, like in the tea, blocks the positive effects. But even dairy-free dark chocolate is made out of things we don't want, the fat and the sugar. The fat is saturated cocoa butter, and is one of the few plant fats that's actually bad for us. It raises our cholesterol. Sugar isn't good for us either, so how do you get the benefits of the cacao bean without the bad stuff? In the form of cocoa powder. Cocoa powder has no sugar or fat, and is just packed with phytonutrients that lower our blood pressure, lower bad cholesterol, and boost our good cholesterol. But isn't exercise the only way to boost our good cholesterol? Exercise, it seems, and cocoa. A new drug by Pfizer, torcetrapib, also boosted one's good cholesterol. Most drugs only lower the bad. The CEO held a press conference calling it one of the most important drugs of our generation. 2 days later, the actual clinical data were released, and the drug was immediately pulled off the market, thrown in the trash, along with the $1 billion in R&D it took to make it. Torcetrapib worked. It does raise your good cholesterol, but it turns out it also raises your chance of dying by about 60%. But on autopsy, I bet your cholesterol's pretty good. I guess we should just stick with a healthy diet. Cocoa also unstiffens our arteries, powerfully boosts our immune system. Yes, though it was funded by the M&M company, and may even combat the effects of aging. This is all just within 12 months. Cocoa beans and aging, an unexpected but welcome friendship. So turning the breakfast smoothie I described earlier into a chocolate smoothie by adding cocoa powder makes it even healthier. Here's my annual recipe for the year: Dutch processed cocoa, try to find fair trade of course, date sugar, frozen dark red cherries, and unsweetened or DHA fortified soy milk. Now, date sugar is not sugar. It's a whole food, whole dates, just pulverized. So that and blackstrap molasses are really the only two healthful sweeteners. So cocoa, date sugar, frozen berries, and plant-based milk. And you can put the ground flax seeds in for a nutrient boost and to thicken it up. Put it on a blender, and we have a chocolate milkshake that's actually good for us, literally health-promoting, meaning the more chocolate milkshake you drink, the healthier you will be. Take out the berries, and you can heat it up for healthy hot chocolate, or instead of the soy milk, try silken tofu, and you've got instant chocolate pudding. The more chocolate pudding you eat, the healthier you are. Kids absolutely love it. It's been a good year in nutritional science. There is some bad news, though, for those trying to eat healthy. Dietary intake studies have shown that vegans, on average, are not getting the recommended daily intake of 3 nutrients, calcium, iodine, and vitamin B12. Using the same criteria, though, omnivores are deficient in 7 nutrients, calcium and iodine, and 5 others. Still, the EPIC study found this year that vegans not getting enough calcium have increased bone fracture risk. Those getting enough, 600 milligrams a day, were fine, but it's not enough to just understand intellectually that plant-based sources of nutrients are superior. We need to put it into practice. The calcium in kale and broccoli is absorbed nearly twice as well as the calcium in milk, but we cut our absorption rate down to 0 if we let our greens rot in the fridge, or we never buy them in the first place. It would be nice if we could somehow absorb the nutrients in fruits and veggies just by staring at them in the produce aisle, but no, we actually have to eat them. Why does this 15-year-old look so unhappy? Maybe it's because the iodine deficiency in her diet that gave her this goiter. Everyone needs iodine, but this is especially important for people who want to eat well, since many healthy plant foods like flax, soy, broccoli have what are called goitrogenic compounds, which can interfere with thyroid function in people with marginal iodine intake. So does that mean we shouldn't eat broccoli? Of course not. We just need to get enough iodine in our diets. It's actually really simple to do. Rather than using natural sea salt, use iodized salt, and you'll probably get all the iodine you need. But if, for good reason, we don't add salt to our food, we just need to get our iodine somewhere. Cow milk drinkers get it because iodine-containing disinfectants are used to disinfect the milk tanks, and so the iodine sort of leaches into the milk. The best source is sea vegetables. You can get it in a multivitamin, but I do encourage people to develop a taste for seaweed. It's a wonderful food, dark green leafies of the sea. It may even prevent cancer. Seaweed inhibits human cancer cell growth, and this new study suggests it may even have a therapeutic potential for people battling liver cancer. Sea vegetables have lots of B vitamins and minerals, particularly the trace minerals like iodine. The problem with seaweed is that we can actually get too much iodine. The recommended daily intake is 150 micrograms a day, but the World Health Organization places the safe upper limit at 1,000 micrograms a day. So that's not a huge amount of wiggle room, and it's less for kids, 300 micrograms or so, maybe too much for a 5-year-old. This much laver or nori, a 2-ounce bag, has enough iodine to last an adult a week. This much dulse, a month. This much wakame, 2 months. And 1 little bag of kelp, 5 years. A quarter gram a day of kelp is too much. And it would be hard to spread that little amount of kelp over 5 years. So I recommend going with one of these other sources. Do not, however, eat hijiki. The reason sea vegetables are so wonderful is that they're packed with trace minerals. They just soak them up right out of the seawater. Hijiki, though, may also absorb bad minerals like arsenic. One seaweed species in particular, hijiki, sucks up so much arsenic that governments around the world are now warning consumers not to eat it. From the US EPA to the British government, to New Zealand, to Canada, even the Chinese government. Here's what it looks like. Note the 2 different spellings. No longer should anyone eat this, or at least not on a regular basis. Lots of other wonderful types of seaweed out there without this problem, so we can get the anti-cancer benefits without the arsenic. So that's calcium and iodine, but I've saved the most important for last. Studies continue to show that those eating plant-based diets tend not to get enough vitamin B12. But really, what's the worst that can happen if we don't get enough B12? Well, if you happen to flip open an issue of the medical journal Nutrition this summer, you'd see titles like this: Irreversible subacute sclerotic combined degeneration of the spinal cord in a vegan subject. And yes, it really is as bad as it sounds. If you look here closely, 57-year-old man, member of a vegan cult. Can you blame the doctor, though? Look what non-B12 supplemented veganism did to this guy. Rotted his spinal cord from the inside out. They immediately started B12 injections, and he got better. He's still paralyzed and may never walk again, but at least he's alive. We wonder why nutritionists and doctors may be skeptical about plant-based diets after reading case reports like this. And it's so easy to get our B12. B12-fortified foods like fortified breakfast cereals, fortified soy milk, or fortified nutritional yeast, or little supplements. Sublingual B12 tablets once a week. It's all in the handout that should have come with the DVD. And we'll never hear of anything like this ever again. Other than B12, how are vegans doing? Well, there are tiny studies on vegans all the time, some comparing pre-existing vegans to omnivores, like this study in Thailand that found that vegans have significantly better baseline kidney function than everyone else. And then there are studies that take meat eaters and put them on a vegan diet to see what happens. Researchers in Sweden, for example, showed this year that eating vegan can fight off rheumatoid arthritis. Dr. Neil Barnard showed that eating vegan can fight off obesity. And with perhaps the most self-evident study title ever, Dr. Dean Ornish showed that eating vegan increases intake of protective dietary factors and decreases intake of pathogenic or disease-causing dietary factors. The Ornish study only had 42 people in it, though. Barnard's 64, the arthritis study 38 vegans, and the kidney one only looked at 25. There have been some big studies on vegetarians in the past, with the California Adventist study now in its 17th year, studying more than 10,000 vegetarians, and leading to really landmark findings, such as vegetarians living about 10 years longer than the general public. 10 years of life is indeed a matter of choice. We've known that vegetarians have much lower rates of diabetes, but we thought it was because they have such low rates of obesity. Vegetarian eating tends to bring one down to a healthy weight, which prevents diabetes, so we thought the link between meatless eating and lower diabetes risk was kind of indirect, but But apparently no. This new study shows that vegetarian eating directly lowers diabetes risk. Longtime vegetarians had 74% less chance of developing diabetes, which means that cutting out meat cuts out 3/4 of our risk. And that was independent of weight. Even at the same weight, for some reason, vegetarians have significantly lower risk of developing diabetes and blindness, amputations, kidney failure, all the complications that come with it. A very important study. Now, compared to studies on vegetarians, studies on vegans have been much smaller. The Heidelberg study only had 60 vegans. Oxford had about 100, then 200, 300, 400. Until recently, the biggest studies on vegans in history only had a few hundred people in it, but there are some new developments. The EPIC study, European Prospective Investigation into Cancer, studying 18,900 vegetarians, and right now the Adventist Health Study 2 is being put together with 100,000 people overall and 33,000 vegetarians. Vegan-wise, EPIC finally breaks the 1,000 mark with 2,600 vegans, and by 2010 we should start getting back data from more than 4,000 American vegans. All right, let me just wrap up here with the bronze, silver, and gold medals for what I consider to be the most interesting studies of the year. This may not actually be bronze, but in some sense, this year was kind of boring. Eat animals, get cancer. Eat plants, get healthy. Take your B12, or else. Nothing really new. Well, this is new. Semen quality of fertile U.S. males in relation to their mother's beef consumption during pregnancy. Meat is so packed with hormones that when pregnant women eat meat, it may affect the development of their son's genital organs, leading to decreased fertility later in life. In effect, meat eaters are at risk for having fewer grandchildren. Hormones in milk and meat may be old news, but this other new study looked into the exposure of young children to the sex steroid hormones in not only milk and meat, but eggs as well. This is for both androgens and estrogens combined. Meat, dairy, but look at eggs, off the chart. There's no such thing as hormone-free meat, milk, or eggs. All animals produce testosterone and estrogen, and these steroids are deposited in their flesh and fluids. The question is, are the levels high enough to negatively affect prepubescent children who normally have very low background levels of sex hormones? For estradiol, for example, the FDA has set a presumptive safe upper limit at 65 micrograms a day. Well, based on a typical dietary intake of animal products, researchers estimate people could consume 100 every day or more. We do not yet know what the consequences are, but there are concerns about effects on reproductive development and increased cancer risk. Interestingly, the hormone levels in eggs from factory farms are the highest. Okay, so the bronze goes to hormonal genital meat malformation. The silver goes to a study on IQ and vegetarianism. First, let me share a little background. We've known for nearly 30 years that vegetarian children test smarter than omnivorous kids. First shown in a 1980 study by Tufts University, the IQ of vegetarian children was found to be about 16 points above average, and their mental age was a year ahead of the rest of their classmates. Of all the veg kids, the vegan kids appeared the smartest. The pediatricians, psychologists, they knew the veg kids were bright, but the researchers noted that they were puzzled that they were so much superior. Which came first, though, the chicken or the egg? Well, for the vegan kids, neither, perhaps, but were they smart because they were vegetarians and therefore getting all that good nutrition, or did they become vegetarian because they were so smart? Well, the mystery's finally been solved, I guess. Those fantastic Brits followed 8,000 kids for 30 years, measured their IQ at age 10, then came back 20 years later and asked which of them had become vegetarian during that time. Their findings? Higher scores for IQ in childhood, associated with an increased likelihood of being a vegetarian as an adult. Smart people evidently eat vegetarian. They even quote Benjamin Franklin, saying, "Vegetarian diets result in greater clearness of head and quicker comprehension." And finally, getting to the gold, the effect of meat consumption on body odor attractiveness. Not just body odor, but body odor attractiveness. 17 male odor donors were on a meat or non-meat diet for 2 weeks, wearing axillary pads to collect body odor. They taped pads into their armpits all day, all night, and then the researchers made them wear an extra layer of clothes to get them even riper. And then after 2 weeks, they took 30 young women and had them sniff the pads all fresh and drippy. Fresh odor samples were assessed for their pleasantness, attractiveness, masculinity, and intensity by 30 women. Then they repeated the study, same guys, but just switched their diets around, same poor women. And just to digress here before I unmask the results to keep up the suspense, the guys were paid cash, 2,000 Czechoslovakian dollars, for the inconvenience of having to eat a non-meat diet for 2 weeks. But the women who had to sniff all those pit pads, they were not paid for their participation. All they got was a chocolate bar. Anyways, back to the results. Who had the most pleasant, the most attractive body odor? The meat eaters or the non-meat eaters? The results showed that the odor of donors when on the non-meat diet was judged as significantly more attractive, more pleasant, and less intense. This suggests that meat consumption has a negative impact on perceived body odor hedonicity, pleasure. Vegetarians smell significantly more pleasurable. Same masculinity, by the way, but less smelly, more pleasant, and significantly judged as more attractive. The one-liner takeaway from this study could be that meat is the pits. This may actually help explain the findings of University of Canterbury researchers this year. This study became an international media sensation. Vegans say sex with meat eaters stinks. My favorite take was probably this tagline in a Canadian paper: "You eat meat, no sex for you." In closing, let me wrap up 2007 for everyone. If we have a desire to smell, evidently, get Parkinson's, skin cancer, breast cancer, pancreatic, bladder, cervical, endometrial, prostate, ovarian, testicular cancer, or have an affinity for dioxins and PCBs, then animals are indeed the food for us. If, however, we'd rather be leaner, have fewer heart attacks, and would rather shy away from insulin needles and chemotherapy, we should eat a B12-fortified diet of whole plant foods. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to see what next year brings, and I hope you'll join me.